Well, basically, I was born and raised within a quarter of a mile from here, just south of here, where my parents' house. And where we sit now, this property was um given to me and my family, my brothers, and all of, by my parents. This property has been in my parents' um, pretty close about 80 years, 80, 90 years. It may be 100, but I'm just talking about what I know. You know, it's probably 80, 85 years. I think my grandfather purchased it, in, I want to say 1912 or 1911 or something like that. So it's been here for a while.
And what's on the property? Describe it for, if somebody can't see it, describe what we're going to see when we see the rest of your property. What's there?
Well, you'll see cornfields, and we really basically, since my father passed away, we do a little farming. I've got a brother that still farms, but the farm has gotten to be so until it's non-profitable. So we keep it, and you know, we farm it a little, but it's not an income.
Why is it not an income?
Well, it's because of the co-op farm. It's because of the way the government has. Uh, 50 years ago, we made well on the farm. You know, we all went to school, and we had no problem. But today, 200-300 acres of land, you cannot make a living off of it. You need a couple of thousand acres. Then you need to get government subsidy.
And that's not happening.
Well, it's not happening to us because we don't have 2,000 or 3,000 acres of land. So, you know. And the farm is just not. It's just not. It's just not practical. Even the big guys are losing out because all you got to do, if Mother Nature don't cooperate, the weather is not there, and the market. You know, so I imagine it's so much import that comes in, and the high cost of fuel and the high cost of just operating, and labor is another task that's no one is willing to render.
You know, Ben and Jerry's just did some series of ads about 330 farms, small family farms, are going under every week in this country. Do you think the government supports farming in this country?
No, not the small farmers, and certainly it has been demonstrated that this country has not been an asset to African American farmers. Period. Um, African American has had it tough in every walks of life, farming, the workforce, even in the education department. It doesn't matter.
So talk to me about what's happening around you here.
Well, just a few years ago, they passed a 2020 a land use plan, and I'm just worried about the impact of what it's going to have. You know, I'm okay, but it's going to have a drastic impact on my, and especially my grandkids, my kids and my grandkids, and I'm afraid that my grandkids will not be able to share and have the luxury that I have. I fear that my grandkids won't be able to live here. Period.
Can you explain to people who don't know what this plan is, what the plan is? Can you talk to us, just kind of summarize what that is and why you think that's going to affect your kids? How's it going to affect them?
Well, first of all, they're not going to be able to build a dwelling like I did and like my brother did. Because of all the rules and the guidelines. And if they're certain distant away from the highway before they're granted a permit, that road has got to be paved and it's got to be brought up to county specs. And you know, just right away you're talking $40,000, $50,000 just right off of the bat. And unless that individual is not, it can go to the bank and have a contractor to come in and build him a dwelling, uh, um, he's not going to be able to afford it.
How does this tie into what's happening with the park and the buffer zone? And can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, well, right as where I'm sitting now, I'm less than 3/4 of a mile. I am less than 4,000 feet from the park,
Which is right over there, right?
which is right over there, just beyond those woods.
And so how's that going to affect you eventually?
Well, they've already decided, they've already began to purchase property. They've already purchased another part of the property that is just wilderness on the other side of the I-20. I mean the 601, which is south of here, probably 3 miles. My fear is that if the park is this close, then what happens when the government decided that they want to protect their investment and have a buffer zone, like they've got in the Yellowstone National Park, or they have in the Great Smoky Mountains. What's going to happen if that happens, and they decided that they want 1 mile of buffer zone? Then that means it's going to take you in right where we sit now.
And a mile is not out of the question.
A mile is only 5,280 feet, and we approximately 4,200 feet. I took my golf cart and run it. I've got the little wheel because I'm in construction, and it's only like 4,200 feet from here to where the park property starts.
But they're going to say it's a buffer zone, nothing's going to happen to your house. What do you think would happen to your house if it's a buffer zone?
Well, that may be true, but I fear the government in this country. Until it may be that nothing will happen to the house, they may grandfather it. How long do a dwelling last? If they grandfather it and says, okay, you can live there for the rest of your life. I'm 61 years old. If I pass it on, or what's going to happen to the other property if my grandkids or my kids are denied a permit to build? Because that land has been declared part of the buffer zone. And of course, our Congressman Clyburn, he don't even know what a buffer zone is. I mean, I personally questioned him at one of our local meetings at one of our Hopkins Park some years ago. He didn't even know what a buffer zone, and we should not have that type of leadership in Congress. He did not know what a buffer zone meant.
Now, you said to me before we started talking, but there's more than meets the eye here. There's more to the story than I might know. Can you talk about that? Can you tell me what's really going on here?
Well, I think what has really happened is that if you would take the I-77 corridor all the way to the 601, which is the dividing line of Calhoun County, I want to say that probably 75 to 80% of the property that's on this side of the Garner's Ferry is owned by African Americans. And the African American has owned it for the last 80, 90, and 100 years. And we've gone back and done a research. The reason the African American owned it, if you would read and find out and search the map in which General Sherman used from Savannah on his march to Columbia, South Carolina, his troops crossed the Congaree River somewhere south of Columbia at the Chatteras Point. And somewhere in this area is where General Sherman troops camped. And they camped because when they marched to Columbia, when they was going to burn Columbia and was going to destroy it, they was afraid of the ambush, because Columbia was the capital, and everyone here in Columbia, the legislators moved and built a new state house in Union, South Carolina.
So the people that actually own land here, how did most of them come to purchase the land?
They come to purchase the land. They actually purchase it from white landowners, the Adams, the Westons, the plantations owners who actually own the property. And because of the Civil War, they couldn't afford it any longer because it was all burned and they didn't have any resource. They didn't have any workers anymore. So the best way for them to survive is to take some of those same slave owners and sell it to them. I do not know how Mr. Money Jackson, which is my grandfather, I don't know how he purchased it. They bought it from the white landowners because there was no plantation houses spared when General Sherman came through. He burned every one of them to the ground. And of course, the plantations owners, they didn't have any resource. Their workers has scattered. Their slaves some has moved north, some has gone join others, and so they started to cut in their property up and just selling it for whatever they could get for it. I want to think that I used to hear my granddaddy said that they paid 50 cents an acre for it. 50 cents an acre. And I want to think that because I've heard different stories, is that they did not have the 50 cent to pay, but they worked and made a white paper commitment. It's like a sharecropper. They work so many years and they exchange white paper, and that's how they come to begin to purchase it, because nobody have any money to start with.
How do people feel about this land?
Well, it's a sentimental. I've been fortunate. I could have lived anywhere I want to. Well, anywhere I could afford to. But to me, it's just home. And I would like for my grandkids to share the same views.
If somebody walked up to you, knocked on your door today and said, listen, we're going to pay you good market value for your home, what would you tell them?
Well, there is not a market value for something that you can't replace.
Lower Richland County is primarily African American. It's like 82% or...
It's about 80, 81, 82, 83%. It used to be about 95%, but now, we've got Caucasians buying property and moving into the area. And there's always been some Caucasian that lives here, like the Hills and, the Adams.
So you can't replace this property. This is your home.
Right.
This is irreplaceable. And I would say that probably most of the people that live in this area are going to say the same thing. They've been here for generations, many of them.
Generations.
But they don't seem to understand because they don't know. A lot of them don't know what's happening. What can we say to them to help them to understand that this is really happening to them? What could you say to them if you could?
That is real tough. I took a 6-month leave away from my business, and it costed me unreal. I challenged the incumbent who represent this District 10, Mrs. Bernice Scott, back in, I want to say 2000, unsuccessfully, but the votes were very close. It was like 167 different, and she was a four-term, and it was tough. It's tough to try and get somebody to be able to have a foresight, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a foresight. We're talking about the future, and it's tough to so many of them. They're only concerned about a job and their income, and they're okay temporarily.
A lot of people just really trying to make a living and support their families at this point, I think, so they're not thinking about the future. Now, we were going to ride around with you for just a few minutes.
Yes, I could take you south a little bit and then over to the large farm. I could take you to where my parents live, and I also could take the back road and show you how close we are to the park.
Okay, so what is the large farm?
Well, it's, I don't know, about 170, 180 acres that's over in the field. It's just a farm. There's nothing there.
And what kind of a farm was it?
Well, we plant soybean and corn, and basically we grind the corn, and we actually make more money off it by selling it to the deer hunters.
And so is that what you still do on it? It's still, that part of it's still working, or?
Yeah. Well, you got to farm it or you got to rent it out. You should pay the taxes. It makes enough to pay the tax.
And then where's your parents' place?
Um,
Parents' place for me. If I were blind and I couldn't see it, what am I going to see there?
if you're looking directly at me, if you could see through the woods, through the trees, if the trees were not there, you would be looking at their house, beyond my brother's house. So they are probably a quarter of a mile in the back of me.
And when did they purchase it?
Ooh, I want to say, I think my daddy got it from my granddaddy back in, my birth date is 44. I want to say about 41 or 42.
Think about that house and tell me about the very best memory that you have in that place.
I had to learn how to cook. I mean, that's it. And I had to work. I worked the farm, so everything else is. There was very little, time for play, and I think we had the first TV in the neighborhood that we could only watch for 1 hour.
So, what was a typical day like for you? Were you at a school age?
Well, at first we had to walk to school. I actually walked to school my first 5 years. I walked 3.5 miles to school, 3.5 miles back. And then we had to work on the farm.
And then how long did you live in that house, and what did you do after school? I mean, once you graduated from school. Tell me a little bit about your path to get where you are today, because you've been very successful.
I don't know about, well, I went to South Carolina State. I started there in 63, 62. Yep. And I was there for 1 year. Then I moved to New York. And school was not for me. I wanted to make money. And I was spending money in school. It was costing my parents $235 a semester. It was less than $500 for a tuition, and that was on campus at Longman Hall. So I moved away and I moved to New York.
And what did you do in New York?
I got a job working with the Yamarada Hess Corporation. I lived in New York and I worked at Perth Amboy. You know where Perth Amboy is? Right across the Hudson. So we used to, from then until now, I've always been in business from one to another.
And describe your business. What do you do?
I'm in the dump truck business. I'm in the construction industry. I transport raw, finished, and unfinished material. We basically do stuff of transport material to build highways and airports and that type stuff.
And what was your biggest challenge in making that successful?
Dealing with the South. Dealing with the South.
Was what?
Getting bonded. I mean, if you can't get bonded, it doesn't matter how well you can perform, and it's all about monetarily. If you've got the money to bond a job, it doesn't matter whether you meet the criteria. I was led to believe in the 60s that if you got an education and you prepare yourself well, that you could do okay, but that's not true. That's just far
So
away.
what kept you going through the hard times?
Spending very little and saving as much as you can, and I'm thankful for my parents for the way they instructed you and taught you how that things were going to be lean more time than it was going to be fat.
Well, it must have worked.
Well, it works sometimes. It doesn't work all the time.
What can you say to all of your neighbors to help them get through what's going to be a difficult time for them coming up?
I don't know. That is real difficulty. We've had meetings on top of meetings. The amount of attendance is probably less than 20%, 5%. They just seem that they may not have the interest. And the reason, I don't know.
Do you think that this whole town and country plan is economically and racially based? Can you talk about that?
Well, I think it's racially based because the restriction, the entire plan, they use the county as saying the county is going to affect the entire county. But that's not true. Because one of the reasons, because the other part is already developed. I mean, how can it have an impact on the Blythewood, the Columbia Northeast? Those areas has already been saturated. There's nothing going to change that. This is the area that has not been developed.
How do you feel when you hear about these red dots they call villages?
Well, I think it was General Custer who put the Indians on reservation, and that's how they described it. But someone that the county either is going to appoint, hire, or to make a decision of where the growth is going to go, and whoever owns the property in that area, in that 1 or 2 mile red dot, is going to be the beneficiary, and the people who own property outside of that is going to be left probably underneath preservation. They may say that you can't do anything with it.
What would you like to see happen?
The whole thing abolished. I would like to see a $300 or $400 million lottery ticket, and I can hire the highest, well-dressed Philadelphia lawyer to sue the entire county and abolish the whole plan. And I think that's the only alternative that I see now. I said the trumpet and the wake-up call has been sounded, and it's going to come. And when it comes, it's going to have a drastic impact, and it's going to be like a tornado, a hurricane. I mean, it's not going to be, and it's almost to that point now. I mean, they're just the restrictions and where we go from there, I don't know.
What do you see for the future of Lower Richland County?
The rich, the very rich, 25, 30, 4 or 5 decades from now, there are not going to be any poor people live here. It's going to be the same thing that happened to Old Reed County. It's going to be the same thing that happened, and first of all, they're not going to have the interest. They just want to survive in their little world. And they're not going to be able to sacrifice like we did and not buy a car or not buy a nice suit of clothes and pay the tax to keep owning the property so that you can pass it on to the next generation.
And where do you think all the poor people are going to end up? People that aren't rich.
Oh, they've created the poor. They've got, the county, from what I understand, has purchased property that they're going to put the poor on. I mean, they've moved the poor out from areas in Columbia, the Saxon home, Waverly home. They've moved them out, and they isolate them. Well, what happens when they do that is that they put them in a position where they can't do any better. It'll be just like, you could call it the projects. The big cities did that 20, 30, 40 years ago. The government come in and took care of the poor and put the poor in, and they were never able to accumulate anything. It's a generation after generation after generation, and the gap, the disparity between the rich and the poor just continue to widen. I don't know whether it's too late, but I certainly have a lot of fear.